my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Trinity III. Each of our propers today gives us an important truth about living a Christian life, and each can serve as a guide through this long Trinity season. For this is a time to reflect and pray on how we live a Christian life. Now, the collect says God has embedded in our nature a desire to build a relationship with him through prayer. St. Peter warns us that once established, that relationship is always being threatened by a fierce adversary, the devil. Then the gospel reminds us we ourselves can disrupt that relationship by wandering away from the Good Shepherd, Jesus. Of the three readings, the collect is the most surprising to me. This prayer is from the sacramentary attributed to Pope St. Gregory and probably written during the 6th century. Now, all our collects have a 5-part structure. There's the address, acknowledgement, petition, aspiration, and it ends with a pleading. But today's collect is unique because it inserts between the petition, we beseech thee mercifully to hear us, and the aspiration, may by thy mighty aid be defended and comforted, an assertion that God has given all people the trait of an hearty desire to pray. That means a deep-rooted natural yearning to pray. What surprised me is I did not at first think this assertion was true. For if everyone shared such a strong desire to pray, we'd all be like those Trappist monks that I visited last month. Those men dedicate their lives to fostering a relationship with God through continuous prayer. I and nearly everyone I meet seem not to have such strong interest in praying so often. The collect's assertion did not make sense to me until I came across this sentence by a motivation theorist named Stephen Rice. He said, quote, "Everybody wants the same thing, but not to the same degree." In other words, instead of instincts, God has created humans with many desires. For example, we all want security, love, family, pleasure, and even power. We also heartily desire a relationship with our Creator that is built through prayer. Let's go back to Rice's statement for a moment. Everybody wants the same things, but not to the same degree. It implies that God has given us the freedom to choose which desires we want to satisfy by applying our time, energy, and resources. In our post-Christian society, unlike the Trappist monks, most of us are prioritizing those desires which satisfy our temporal needs rather than our eternal needs. But if you get a chance to talk like I did with one of those monks, he will tell you that at one time, he was just like you and me. He wasn't born a monk. He too had to slowly awaken to the importance of prayer and begin to gradually let go of those desires which distracted him away from God. Perhaps that unique statement in the collect is there today to remind us that during this Trinity season, we should consider elevating prayer above our other wants. Moving to the collect, we hear the epistle of St. Peter warning that even when we have that relationship with God and are steadfast in faith, your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. This is something I do have a personal experience with. When Hope and I lived in Sacramento, a young couple started attending our church. They were not regulars and pretty much kept to themselves. I got to know the husband through the men's group, and prior to leaving for our annual men's group weekend retreat, we were notified that his wife had just drowned herself in the Sacramento River. Now, we didn't see or hear from him again for over a year. That weekend, our retreat was held at a rustic house in the hills outside of San Francisco. The death of the woman was on everyone's mind. Here is what I experienced on the retreat, and it lives with me to this day. After breakfast on Saturday, while walking up a steep trail with several other men, I looked to my left, and there, a bit off the trail, was a lion standing on its hind legs, surrounded by flames. It looked at me, and without saying anything out loud, it boastfully told me he had taken that young woman. After which, it immediately disappeared. I'm convinced that whatever emotional problems she was having left her vulnerable to the adversary, and she was unable to be sober and vigilant. He was warning me too. Now, I have not seen that lion since, but I have heard his roar. Perhaps St. Peter could write about this lion because he himself had seen it beckoning to him when he denied knowing Christ. Perhaps you too have heard his roar. If so, Peter is telling us to remain sober and vigilant together. Finally, we have the simple parable of the lost sheep. We all probably heard our Sunday school teachers read it to us. They likely told us that if we lose our way, if we're frightened, lost, Jesus, our shepherd, will always come to rescue us. As adults, it gets easier to wander away from the shepherd and to get seriously and even permanently lost. Now, how do we do that? How do we lose our way? The general confession in our morning and evening prayers directly give us the reasons why. We have erred and strayed from thy ways like lost sheep. It says we have followed too much the devices and desires of our own hearts. Here are those desires again. We choose to prioritize what is temporarily important to us over that which is eternally important. But it is so easy to do. Instead of coming to church on Sunday to worship God, there is the lawn, the kids' soccer game, jogging, biking, football on TV, and even the hangover from Saturday night that needs to be subdued. They are the devices and desires of our own hearts, not God's. Next, the confession says, we have offended against thy holy laws. This is baffling to many people because few of them even know God's holy laws. The 10 Commandments have been replaced by the 12 steps, the 4 agreements, the 7 spiritual laws of success, and all the other self-help literature that's being sold out there. In the early service, we were required to recite the Decalogue on the first Sunday of the month. Perhaps during this Trinity season, it is a good time for all of us to read and regularly study those commandments so we aren't tempted to offend against his holy laws. Finally, in the confession, there is that wonderful saying, we have left undone those things which he ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done, and there is no health in us. My best friend died 2 years ago at the age of 93. He was a church and synagogue organist and a choir master in Washington, D.C. His passion was playing classical music on his Steinway piano at home in Norfolk. Now, he loved his wife, had 2 children. He lived a decent and very honorable life. He was an agnostic and probably more of an atheist than that. I think it was because he did not see himself as a sinner. He did not believe that he had done those things which we ought not to have done. I will always regret not asking him if he had left undone those things which we ought to have done. He was a stubborn guy, so he probably would have told me no. He did not leave anything undone. Perhaps for many of us Christians who try hard to do those things which we ought to do, The real question we should be asking ourselves every day is, what have we left undone? Let us all consider adding this simple question to our daily meditation and prayers throughout the Trinity season. In the name of the Father, and